You want me to put that on my todger?
This one's wife. A sustained period of Sussex silence. Hello, I'm H.G. Tudor. I've explained to you before that there are many narcissists within the royal family. Prince Andrew, there's a short series about him and various interactions. This one's wife, who provides us with wealth of material. King Charles, Queen Camilla, two of them being an example of narcissistic cementation. And there are others besides. And it is useful within the context of this one's wife and her victim, Harry, to look at the interaction that occurs vis-a-vis King Charles. Camilla Tominey, who writes in the Telegraph, tells us the king turns 75 with just one son by his side. If the king were to make one birthday wish, it would undoubtedly be for a sustained period of silence from the Sussexes and their supporters. Undoubtedly, it would be, because the repeated nonsense that's spouted from Monty's shit show amounts to a threat to control. Charles, however, is readily able to deal with that. He doesn't take it head on. He doesn't hoover Harry or this one's wife in order to make them shut up. He undoubtedly comments upon them adversely, smearing them to most likely Camilla, William, senior courtiers who agree with His Majesty that the errant pair are ridiculous, a pain in the arse, and best ignored. And in other instances, he will simply jettison the thoughts about either of the gruesome twosome, Hank and Skank, Slow and Ho, Ginge and Whinge, thus affording the third assertion of control by staying in withdrawal. Tominey writes, when sources close to the king were asked some months ago whether the monarch planned to give an interview to mark his 75th birthday, the reply was rather telling. Insisting any celebrations would be minimal and family-orientated, facade management, one palace joker inside, this is not Netflix, you know. Another added, His Majesty is not given to fuss over such things as it is, but he is also acutely conscious there have been many set-piece royal events of late, and his firm thinking is that events to mark his birthday will be minimal. The consensus behind palace gates is that there have been enough fly-past and marches. Instead, the king will mark the official start of a programme to tackle food waste called the Coronation Food Project next weekend. Yet, with the Duke and Duchess of Sussex still estranged from the royal family, assertion of control by staying in a position of withdrawal from King Charles, from the non-narcissism of the family, the implementation of a no-contact regime, following expert advice, any private festivities are likely to be a muted affair. The king has not seen his younger son Prince Harry, his daughter-in-law this one's wife, or his grandchildren Archie 4 and 2-year-old Lilibet, since last year's Platinum Jubilee celebrations, and it's fair to say a lot has happened in the subsequent 18 months. Although post-Oprah tensions appeared to ease somewhat at the late Queen's funeral, when the King gave permission for Harry to wear his military uniform for the vigil at his grandmother's coffin in Westminster Hall, the airing of the couple's incendiary Netflix documentary weeks later, and the publication of Harry's explosive autobiography, Spare, in January put paid to hope of any reconciliation. Naturally, as you know, this was done by Harry's wife as a consequence of her need to assert control over the royals by smearing them, by drawing fuel by way of people's responses, and of course the important residual benefit of money arising from the Netflix publication and also Spare. When the Duke travelled alone to the King's coronation in May, he only stayed in London for 48 hours, barely having any contact with his father or brother, Prince William, which again demonstrates the hold that has been asserted over Harry and the impact that hold over him has had, whereby he's been largely ostracised by other members of his family. The Sussexes were unable to join their nearest and dearest at Balmoral for the first anniversary of the late Queen's death in September. Reason being, of course, this one's wife's narcissism determined that it would be too difficult for her to control everybody in person and therefore decided that she could assert control by staying in a position of withdrawal, and her narcissism saw nothing else to be gained by attending. Harry popped into Windsor Castle to pay his respects, although he had to stay in a nearby hotel because he had not given due notice of his intention to visit the royal residence in Berkshire. Then, when he turned 39 a few days later, during the Invictus Games in Dusseldorf, Germany, he did not receive any official royal acknowledgement of his birthday. Again, this is as a consequence of who he's got literally and figuratively into bed with. The fact that he has come under the ensnarement of a narcissist, which has disrupted what were previously decent family relationships, has resulted in him losing out to his family, and he still doesn't fully understand it as a consequence of the way that he's been manipulated and his own emotional thinking. According to one well-placed insider, communications between the King and Prince Harry remain pretty poor. They don't speak much, if at all. On the one hand, King Charles won't bother because his narcissism decrees that he ought not to bend over backwards to his errant son and daughter-in-law, and that he can assert control subconsciously by staying in a position of withdrawal. Harry doesn't make much of an effort because he's been repeatedly told that he's not the one at fault, and he now believes that. It's been whispered into his ear so many times by his handler, he believes that his father should be apologising to him. And, of course, he has some strong narcissistic traits himself, resulting in stubbornness and defiance on his part. According to this article, it doesn't help that the workaholic king hasn't ever been an easy man to pin down. Unlike most families who communicate by text and WhatsApp, senior royals such as Charles III are rather more old school, preferring to communicate by telephone or letter. Traditionally, he would always schedule a call with both of his sons on a Sunday, but while he still converses weekly with William, assertion of control directly by hoovering his elder son, there is remarkably little contact with his other darling boy. One reason for the ongoing impasse is the king's disappointment and dismay at how Harry has treated his wicked stepmother, Camilla. Remember, through narcissistic cementation, Camilla is an extension of the king, and therefore Harry's criticisms of her have amounted to criticisms of him, the king. Accusing the Queen, 76, of engaging in briefings, leakings and plantings, he described her in Spare as a dangerous and a villain who left bodies in the street. I have complex feelings about gaining a step-parent who I thought had recently sacrificed me on her personal PR altar, he wrote, citing an instance when Camilla allegedly leaked one of her early conversations with William. This newspaper subsequently reported that it was in fact Camilla's former assistant who had leaked the conversation and that she was subsequently let go. Referring to an incident in 2019 when William was seething because Pa and Camilla's people had planted a story or stories about him and Kate and the kids, Harry added, "Give Pa and Camilla an inch," he said, "they take a mile." According to her companion, the Marchioness of Lansdowne, while the claims understandably hurt the Queen, she doesn't let it get to her. Her philosophy is always, don't make a thing of it and it will settle down, least said, soonest mended. Or, in other words, assertion of control by jettisoning it, staying in a position of withdrawal. The King, on the other hand, appears to have taken the extraordinary salvo very much to heart. If there's one thing that winds that man up, threat to control, then it's attacks on his wife. He's very defensive of Camilla, reason being she's an extension of him. William has been similarly enraged by Harry's depiction of his sister-in-law Kate as cold and unfeeling in Spare. The difference here, William's defence of his wife is driven by his own emotional empathy for her. Both know that they've brought their wives into an institution that has required them to make huge sacrifices. Negative press coverage is one thing, but they don't expect members of their own family to stick the boot in. Another sticking point is Harry's apparent refusal to move on. While forward-looking, this one's wife, 42, appears intent on rebranding herself in America, her husband is still waging war on the British media, but of course he's encouraged to do so by this one's wife, because it enables her to nullify the threats to control that's posed by them. He is being puppeted by his wife. And thus, war is being waged by association on the palace with various ongoing court cases. The royal family will also be wary of the imminent publication of Endgame, the second book by the improbably named plastic-faced lieutenants Omid Scobie, who wrote Funding Freedom, Finding Dollars, a 2020 biography of the Sussexes, which, of course, If you want to be thoroughly entertained with my piss take of that, just go to the Knowledge Vault and you can obtain my observations about that book there. This one's wife finally admitted that she contributed to that biography via a friend. Although the couple appear to have distanced themselves from Mr. Scobie in recent months, not inconveniently, his latest literary offerings promises to reveal moments the royal family should be ashamed of and take an accurate look at whether the royals are still models of civility and decorum. You can be assured, and I will cover it in due course once it is released, that once again this one's wife is utilising the lieutenant mouthpiece that is Omid Scobie. As one palace insider pointed out, as Omid doesn't actually have any royal contacts beyond Team Sussex, it's likely to be a rather one-sided affair, which of course is just how this one's wife likes it. Another journalist still to believe to be in contact with Harry and this one's wife is the ITV News anchor Tom Brady, who was the only British broadcaster to interview the Duke when Spare hit the bookshelves. Eyebrows were raised last week when Mr. Bradby, who conducted William and Kate's only television engagement interview, but has subsequently fallen out of favour with the Prince, followed up a story in Byline Times, claiming that the King pushed Harry and this one's wife into commercial deals in the United States by withdrawing £700,000 funding for a trial year in Canada. See parts passing. In reality, as the Telegraph had previously reported, the couple were having conversations with the likes of Quibi, a now-defunct rival to YouTube from early 2019. Contrary to Harry's claim on Oprah that they didn't have a plan, the Duchess is understood to have been in talks with Netflix about her Pearl series at about the same time, months before the couple announced they were stepping down as senior royals. The ITV News package, which featured prominently on the news at 10 on October the 26th, despite unfolding events in the Middle East, repeated the claim that the couple had their annual allowance stopped when they refused to remove from legal papers the name of a palace aide they claimed had leaked a story about them moving to Canada to the Sun newspaper on January the 7th, 2020. Pity play. The employee denies leaking the story and has been cleared by both police and palace investigation of any wrongdoing. 2 days later, the couple released their bombshell Megxit statement, setting out their quest for a progressive new role that would see them work to become financially independent. ITV News claimed it had learnt of an ultimatum issued by the royal household that may have precipitated the final rift between Charles and Harry and this one's wife, adding it was the leaking of Harry and this one's wife's decision to leave for Canada that we understood led to a complete collapse of trust. Yet 2 days after the alleged leak, the couple announced their royal departure on a slick new Archwell website containing well-prepared content that showed a huge amount of forward planning had gone into the move. Hypocrisy. Harry and this one's wife were still receiving £700,000 a year from the King after they released their Megxit statement. The Telegraph understands that the late Queen was reimbursing their rent for Frogmore Cottage, their former Windsor home, where £2.4 million in renovations were paid for with taxpayers' money out of the sovereign grant. Residual benefits indeed. Royal sources suggest that there were several reasons why they were financially cut off. Foremost was the fact that they would no longer be undertaking any official engagements after their planned departure to the US in March 2020. Therefore, why pay for them if they're not doing anything? Furthermore, they had expressed a desire to become financially independent. As it became clear behind the scenes that they were doing commercial deals, the late Queen and the King reportedly became rather fed up that the couple seemed to want to have their cake and eat it. Both were already independently wealthy, with Harry's inheritance from his mother and the Queen Mother thought to top £10 million, and this one's wife having allegedly boasted of having several million in the bank. Yes, but she's a narcissist and that's a boast. I doubt it was anywhere near several million. The multimillionaires' repeated gripes about paying for their own security, pity play, which was funded by the public purse when they were working royals, understandably raised eyebrows among the royals and their staff. Little wonder, then, that royal relations remained so frosty. If the King were to make one birthday wish on November the 14th, it would undoubtedly be for a sustained period of silence from the Sussexes and their supporters. A breakdown of the ongoing relationship between Charles, Harry, and this one's wife. And again, you can understand so much more of the dynamic, recognising the clash of two narcissists within all of this. What about below the line? What are people's observations to this particular article? Someone. The more I learn, the more distasteful, despicable, and downright offensive I find this couple. They really are the thickest form of life going. I really hope karma exists, because this pair deserve all that's coming to them. John Bull. The titles and privilege still need to be removed. The cancer is still within the body of the constitutional body. In this, as in so much else, the country shows its weakness to all who revel in harming it. Ellie Bowyer. What on earth does me again look like in that appalling white dress? It's the Fridge by Valentino one. Does this woman own a single item of clothing that fits? Brian Basford. Not really. It's only morons and fairy tale people who take any notice of this one's wife and a little lap dog. Maggie McKay. And a sustained period of silence from all and every form of the media, I should think. This scraping the barrel for any scraps of dirt or innuendo is now beyond tedious. Anthony Francis. They are nothing apart from gossip value and for selling cheap magazines. Gregory Edelston. Time to abolish these parasites. Jason Hardiman. It probably has more to do with Harry being a mood hoover. You can imagine him jumping at every opportunity to explain to us lesser beings how we are inherently racist and imperial monsters, which of course has all been placed in his mind by his handler. T.C. George. As an American, I'm embarrassed and revolted by this one's wife. By contrast, I think the Duchess of Windsor was an admirable woman who was lied about and mistreated greatly in the United Kingdom. Hills Wills. There's no reason for the King and the Prince of Wales to make any sort of contact with the Sussexes. Their disloyalty, their lies, their treatment of the Queen and Prince Philip, and more besides, means any hope of family forgiveness is out of the question. Hopefully the King realises this and stops his attempts to fix an unfixable situation. El Tully. The Monty Shit Show moaners. Let them go and get on with it. Hilary Clark. H&M would not be good chess players, no thought about implications. Indeed, entirely correct, as a consequence of him being thick and her always operating in the short term as a consequence of the way that her narcissism functions. Little sympathy, as always, for the gruesome twosome, and another piece that demonstrates the gulf that exists, all precipitated, as a consequence of the needs of the narcissist from Monty Shit Show. I'm H.G. Tudor. Thank you for listening.